My name's Dan Wingard. I'm the office leader of the Redmond, Washington John L. Scott office, and I just want to talk about a couple of things in this extreme frenzied market. And I see this consistently, so I just want to bring this to your attention. I'm going to share a couple of things here. First of all, we have a buyer's advisory in a seller's market. So I want you to make sure that you cover these items, and if you're interested, I'm glad to share this, but it talks about the seller's market, contingencies, what to look out for, what your risks are. Some of these risks, not all of them, but some of them are waiving a financing contingency, appraisal, septic, inspection, title, pending sale of another property, everything waived at the hope of being the winning offer. And sometimes that's just what needs to take place to be able to win the offer. It doesn't mean it's the wise thing to do. So you want to make sure that your buyer is well aware of the risks involved in doing anything like that. I want to show a couple of things that we're seeing, some of the addendums that we're seeing in this market. And one of them is this: so buyer's purchase of the property is not contingent on buyer obtaining financing. However, in order to purchase the property, buyer will be using cash and mortgage for the subject property. The purchase is not contingent on property appraising for the sales price. Seller agrees to grant buyer appraiser access to the property of completing appraisal. So a lot of those things are covered. We just put in an amount of earnest money because we're seeing ridiculous amounts. Will be released to seller on mutual acceptance. Once released, it will become a non-refundable deposit toward the purchase price. Earnest money will be refunded to buyer if and only if seller's inability to deliver a marketable title to buyer, seller defaults or backs out of the offer. So things can happen where buyers change their minds, or something happens with their ability to get a loan if they're going to get a loan. We have a volatile stock market, so maybe they're relying on some funds, and at the time they make the offer, they're caught up in the excitement. So you, as a professional broker or agent, make sure that they're aware, that your buyers are aware of the potential risks. Another example of this is earnest money shall be released within 3 days. Buyer and seller agree that the holder of the earnest money is instructed to release the earnest money without need of further authorization. What I want to point out to here is, besides all of this release, it says if this transaction fails to close for any reason other than default by seller, the non-refundable deposit shall remain the property of seller. This one is extremely dangerous because if the seller does not provide just cannot provide marketable title, maybe there's a lien on it, something happens, that earnest money effectively would be maintained by the seller. So the best thing that I can advise you to do is to have an addendum that, first of all, states the risks with non-refundable fees, if that's what's going on, and agrees, it's very clear, it's not earnest money, it's being converted to a non-refundable fee, and there's a lot of verbiage in a contract that relates to earnest money, which it's not, so there could be some confusion on what that is. So make sure that you have some verbiage written by an attorney that makes sense and talks about, for all practical purposes, this money will not be the buyer's if something doesn't move forward. There is another company that also has some verbiage regarding non-refundable earnest money. It does talk about converting earnest money to a non-refundable deposit. And one of the things that I see missing is I see brokers just taking pieces of this out of here, but not leaving one of the most important parts that this company has at the very end, which states that this is risky. And a lot of these brokers are not making sure that the buyer has signed this and is aware of that. So all of that said, I want to make sure that you are acting as a professional, not just looking to win, but thinking of repercussions if for some reason something happened to the buyer. We've had situations where an illness took place and they could no longer move forward, and then they've got several $100,000 wrapped up in earnest money that they don't have a right to. And we've had folks that walk away from the deal before depositing earnest money. The seller still has a right to it, and it could lead to lawsuits that are not favorable. So be careful out there. Any questions, feel free to reach out, and happy sales.